Welcome to The Beat. We are covering this developing news tonight. The mass shooting in Minneapolis has left 2 children dead, 17 injured. Another terrible day in America as we face a shooting. We will have the latest reporting on that for you coming up this hour. I want you to know that up front. We also have a significant news guest. Maryland Governor Wes Moore is here. One of the key figures that's emerged in this turbulent era, the MAGA era, as well as a time where Democrats are looking for new leadership. Wes Moore clearly on the top of some of those lists. So I've got to tell you, he's coming back to the beat after a bit of time, and we're looking forward to that conversation. As you also see on your screen, at a time where Donald Trump is trying to kneecap the Fed and make it a partisan institution, changing its very core, Nobel winner Paul Krugman, one of the most respected economists in the country, joins me on that. So those are 2 big news guests coming up. Our top story is what the president is doing in Washington, scenes that are abnormal, that echo what we see in other countries, including non-democracies, and yet what the Donald Trump era in the second term means. For people who say everything's the same or nothing changes or it's the first term again, this is not the first term. We didn't have permanent efforts at National Guard troops in multiple places, including our capital, in the first term of Trump. And Americans who are hearing about this, even amidst what I've mentioned, the reality that in the late summer, people vacation, people definitely tune out of news, Congress is in recess, Americans are any way they can letting Republican members of Congress know that Congress is supposed to be a co-equal branch, that we have not ever been a country that has the military out in our capital for no reason other than the partisan or power-hungry demands of a given politician, I don't care what party. So people are addressing the deployment.
Them degrees. We respect them.
We don't respect you.
The problem is, it's the blue cities. The blue cities are the problem.
He is also given the opportunity in the Constitution. Y'all, this is lawlessness. This is what lawlessness looks like. So
I do not think that we should be sending National Guard into other cities unless the governor.
We're going to watch you vote. We're going to watch you vote.
Those are just some of the meetings in Republican areas, to say nothing of independent areas or liberal areas. You start to pile up, and the polling shows the country's against this. Many other Republicans have refused to hold town halls at all. And one more point that's important to understand here. You saw Susan Collins, who often talks about independence and then votes in lockstep with the MAGA priorities. Susan Collins talked about respecting the Guard, as if rerunning some anti-troops playbook from the Vietnam era is going to work. But people have information, they have their phones. A lot of people, even in those Republican areas, are hip to the Trump playbook. No one is talking about disrespecting the troops. Most people understand they have been given an assignment that is unusual, to say the least. What they don't respect, what concerns them, is the politicians trying to abuse the troops. I showed you the polling there. We'll put it up again. 56% of Americans oppose what's happening. And National Guard members often have nothing to do because there isn't a rampant daylight crime wave or riot for them to patrol. Earlier today, the mayor of D.C. also weighed in.
What we know is not working is a break in trust between police and community, especially with new federal partners in our community. We know having masked ICE agents in the community has not worked, and National Guards from other states has not been an efficient use of those resources.
As we look at this question, the breakdown in civil-military relations, in the efforts to have the National Guard do what is traditionally daily policing, there are big questions here. Maya Wiley is, of course, a former SDNY civil prosecutor. She ran for mayor in New York. She runs the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. And in the city of New York, she has also worked explicitly on those issues of police-civilian relations. Here, it's military being assigned as police activity relations. What do you think is wrong with what's happening in the way the National Guard is being used right now?
Well, that's a very long list, Ari. But let's start with the fundamentals for most Americans, which is why we see the polling you cited. It is because police accountability, the ability for us as people to have some direction about what our priorities are, what we care most about, what we fear most, and what we want done about it is often at the local level. It's people we vote for, whether it's for a state office or for a city office, who then is going to direct forces like police forces about what they can and cannot do. And we've had a huge, huge need to have a reckoning in this country with ensuring that policing is fair, is safe, and is not biased against people who are Black or Latino. What Trump has done, which is, by the way, in the Project 2025 playbook, is to say, we will talk about high crime rates, by the way, whether the facts match the statistics or not. Use that to drive fear so that we can take control of places we don't politically control.
Right.
Meaning the whole point is Donald Trump doesn't like a policy on bail reform. That is a matter of state and local law. It is not a matter of federal law. But if you don't like it and you're the president and you can take over local law enforcement, you can do whatever you want. And basically, that's what Donald Trump just said in a press conference, is that he can do whatever he wants. Well, no, you can't, and we can't let him.
You say we can't let him. When you look at how it's playing out, it's both so small as to at times be ridiculous, and yet the threat is as serious as it gets. I contrast that to show that now that it's going on day after day, it's not just Trump talking. You actually have real people out in Washington who are guardsmen and women, and what do they have to do? Well, the Post reports they're doing landscaping, they're doing sanitation duties, they're stepping up in places where the Park Service was defunded. Custodial work, the Post notes, is usually National Park Service work. They were facing, quote, staffing shortfalls when the Trump administration directed additional cuts. And so on the one hand, it's absurd. On the other hand, experts say this is the building of a kind of a federal police force to carry out the president's partisan goals, which is very serious.
And which he has said he wants to drive across democratically controlled cities across the nation, many of whom, by the way, are peopled with Black mayors. And the rhetoric that is both partisan and the rhetoric that stereotypes people who are Black, people who are Latino, is about driving division so he can take power he does not constitutionally have. And I think we have to be very clear about that. Your point about D.C., I just want to elevate this too. It is having a real cost on real people.
Sure.
I mean, that when he first called up the National Guard, I have a friend whose son is like one of my nephews, who was searching for his passport because he was so afraid to travel the city streets he's always traveled as a young Black man without identification and a passport. That is exactly the kind of thing that is taking a real toll on real people.
Well, as you say, and we'll put some of this imagery back up, this footage, it's the imagery of crisis, but it's a selective crisis. It's a crisis being created for those being patrolled. And the messaging to, as you mentioned, red states and places that don't have deployments is, don't worry, we won't come for you. I wonder, even in this polarized time, Maya, whether history suggests that those kind of promises from one who would wield this kind of power aren't very cashable. In other words, even if we say, oh, that's a narrow mindset, oh, you should care more. Forget whether you care. If you're in one of these places where the president says, oh, as long as you truck with me, you'll be good. I don't know that John Bolton and other people have found that works out.
Well, I do think the history of retribution, a word Donald Trump himself used, which is, I will come for anybody who gets in my way. And I will use the powers of government to do it. And that includes people I don't like personally. So he said it, he's done it, we've seen it. And I think everybody has to worry about any person in power of any party that is willing to use power for their own personal gain. That's what we're seeing here.
Yeah. Maya Wiley, on this important story here that shouldn't be normalized, even as Trump tries to make this normal life in our capital. Thank you for being here. I mentioned that we have special coverage coming up on the horrific school shooting in Minnesota. Also, Donald Trump facing new accusations of market control socialism something that actually fits with what he's trying to do at the Fed. Paul Krugman, a Nobel economist, is here. And as mentioned, the big news guest tonight, Governor Moore, on fighting Trump and what matters right now. He returns with us in 90 seconds. Fresh outrage over President Trump's use of the National Guard here. He says he will also consider deploying Guard troops to other cities and admitting he views this as a partisan project, that he will go to Democrat-run cities. He has mentioned Baltimore. Joining us now is Maryland Governor Wes Moore. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for being here. Thank you so much for having me.
Great to have you. Let's start with what's happening here. Washington, obviously very close to where you govern, and the idea that, as the president says, he would do this on a partisan basis. What's your response?
And first, I want to say to all the people in Minnesota that our hearts go out to you. I finished speaking with Governor Walz earlier on, and you know, he's having one of the toughest days that any of us can have as chief executive. So to him, to the entire Minnesota family, to all those families, we just want to let them know that everyone in Maryland is here with them and thinking of them, and they're in our hearts. And I think it actually, when I think about the president's comments that he literally made from the Oval Office yesterday, where he was talking about how this is a good political issue for them to use and utilize when it comes to the midterm elections. One thing that is, and again, as we hear it, for all of us who had to live and exist in these communities that have been chronically neglected, who have had to live and exist and grow up in communities where we knew that our safety was not a concern. For people in very high perches and people who were in power, for people who knew they spoke about us and never having conversations with us, that unfortunately the comments of the President of the United States just validates what so many of us felt as we were coming up inside of those communities, that there actually is not a concern about our safety, that this is just a game. And it rings incredibly frustrating for those of us who actually are serious about this work. When I first came on board, I remember the year before I became the governor in 2022, Baltimore City was averaging almost a homicide a day. That for the 8 years under my predecessor, we saw the homicide rate nearly double, the non-fatal shooting rate did double, and we came in with a completely new philosophy about the way we're going to address violence and public safety in our community, that we're going to work with local elected officials like the mayor and the state's attorney, and we made historic investments in local law enforcement, historic investments in technology, historic investments in the community. And it has produced not just encouraging results, but historic drops in violent crime in Baltimore City. It's because we actually take the work seriously, and we're not seeing that from the White House right now.
Understood that, and that goes to how you're approaching it locally within your authorities. When you look at what the president is suggesting, we have the list of many of the cities. It's hard not to notice how many are led by Black American leaders. Do you view this, and do you think there's enough evidence to suggest that this is part of the targeting and sort of a race-baiting fight that he wants?
Well, I think we are watching consistent trends that we have seen, so it kind of tracks with the President of the United States, and it's the reason why I actually invited him, and I said, come to Baltimore. Because, especially when ignorant comments are made, the only way to address ignorance is education. So come and learn. Come and spend time in our communities. Come and spend time with community violence intervention groups like We Are Us, who are actually on the ground doing the work. Come and spend time with our local law enforcement who are on the beat. Come and spend time with the mayor and the state's attorney, and come see what we see as we walk our communities every single day. And of course, the response that I received from the President of the United States, with his laughing crowd around him, was just simply making a snide personal comment about me. And so so it does become very frustrating when we actually know what can work. We know that instead of doing things like cutting $30 million of gun violence prevention, like the president has just done for the state of Maryland, that we know if he could do things like invest in license plate readers and actually pass federal legislation that bans ghost guns, things we have been calling for, but they have just scoffed off because they said bring in the National Guard to pick up litter is somehow a better strategy to fight crime in inside of our society, we know that there is a better way. And we know that if we actually had a partner inside of Washington, we could demonstrate what a better way looks like to continue producing the kind of results that the people in our communities hope for.
You mentioned sort of his personal approach, and he's been on both sides of it, kind of attacking you, but then also invoking your support, which I guess it means if you did think highly of him, that would be a positive. That's usually right why people invoke certain support. And again, some viewers may have heard about this. I got you on, so I'm going to ask. You have the headline: Trump falsely claims Governor Moore called him the greatest president. In terms of how lies work, it sounds like more of the way he talks and the way you talk. But I guess my question is to have you on record here. Was he lying? And what does it tell you that he would want people to think that you like him?
Yeah, we'll have breaking news on the show today. The president's lying.
Okay.
And I know that's shocking for a lot of voters to hear that. But actually what happened was when he first came up, the very first words out of his mouth was, he told me that I was a really good looking guy and I was really good looking in person too. And then he proceeded to say that my people are telling me that you're doing fantastic work. And he said, how can I help? And I started talking about the bridge. That I told him how a year and a half ago, how we had one of the most tragic moments in our state's history. And we've been able to really give a case study on how to respond in these moments of crisis, to move with speed, but also humanity. And I told him that we would really love his continued support. And it's ironic now that this is the week that he then decides that he wants to threaten us with taking away bridge financing, despite the fact that he never gave it to us in the first place.
Yeah, and we have that headline on the bridge financing. You know, Governor, it's funny. It's the way we live, right? That you're telling us that the president said to you, you're good looking in person. It's just such a funny way for politicians to relate. I'm reminded of Jay Rock. You ever listen to Jay Rock?
Yes, of course.
Who said, don't hit me when I'm working. She said, I look way better in person. And Trump giving you that energy, and we're not refereeing it. We're just reporting it. So that's part of your relationship. Broadening out.
Well,
again,
it's kind of like I was saying, and it's kind of like Kendrick when I say to the president, "You don't tell lies about me, and I won't tell the truth about you."
Hey, on Not Like Us, which talk about how it all comes together. That line was popularized by Adlai Stevenson. An old school Democrat. So it's all full circle today. You know, I mentioned earlier in the program, I know you're not going to make any other news about politics, but it's no secret that Democrats are looking around. There's a view that maybe they want a strong governor figure who is standing up to this administration. And I don't think you're the only name, but it's no secret that you and Governor Newsom, maybe Pritzker, are some of the names we're seeing circulated. How do you take that? Can you answer this question without giving us the usual talking points? You know, you're honored but busy and focused on work. People are hungry for leadership. Democrats see a lot of DC leaders who they don't think are fighting hard enough or inventive enough. So walk us through how you see all that, knowing all the caveats that, of course, you're busy with your day job.
Well, no, what I say is, I mean, the people of my state, they need me now, and I'm locked in, because these are not glancing blows that are coming to the state of Maryland. These are direct shots. When the President of the United States has now fired over 12,000 Marylanders who are federal workers, people who are doing things like making sure that our food is safe and making sure that our critical infrastructure is protected. When the President of the United States looks at historic floods taking place in Western Maryland, and when we put in for federal disaster relief support, which we qualified for, and we simply get a response from the White House saying support for Maryland is not warranted. When we get an FBI building that we worked for 10 years and across all quantitative levels to say should be going to the state of Maryland, and the President of the United States says the FBI building is not going to Maryland because it is a liberal state. Like the president, like we are being attacked by the federal government right now. And my people need to understand, and they know that, listen, I don't come from the world of politics. I'm a soldier and I'm standing my guard. And we are locked in to make sure that our people will continue to grow and thrive and succeed in this moment, despite the fact that we're watching a federal government who seems to make my communities and our neighborhoods some kind of punchline, instead of understanding that when you're talking about the people of Baltimore, what you are forgetting is they're also Americans too. And they hear you loud and clear.
Understood. Governor Moore, on a bunch of topics. Appreciate your time tonight.
I appreciate you, Art. Thank you so much.
Okay. See you again. Thank you. We just heard there from Governor Wes Moore on several topics, including the Trump administration's approach. If you saw the whole interview, you may recall he began by, of course, mentioning his heartfelt thoughts for the people going through the horrific shooting in Minnesota. I told you earlier we have the update on that. Shooter killed 2 students, injured 17 others, 14 among them students. The 2 killed were an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. The attacker ultimately dying of a self-inflicted gunshot wound at the same scene. Now, this shooting was at the Annunciation Catholic School in Minnesota. It was during morning mass. Police have said the attacker shot through the windows at the students in the pews using a rifle, a shotgun, and a pistol, that all 3 were lawfully purchased. Although at times like this, one of the debates Americans have is whether all of the laws are perfectly written or could be tightened to try to prevent guns from getting in the wrong people's hands. The FBI also investigating it as an act of domestic terrorism and a potential hate crime targeting Catholics. Here was the mayor of Minneapolis speaking earlier during this horrific day there.
I think the impetus has to be on all of us as leaders to do a whole lot more, to recognize that we've got more guns in this country than we have people. And it's on all of us to recognize the truth and the reality that we can't just say that this shouldn't happen again and then allow it to happen again and again beyond that.
Different emphasis there than we hear sometimes from some leaders, especially in the past when it was often recounted that it's too early to discuss policy solutions. This is a daily problem in America, our guns epidemic and the misuse of guns for crime against children being one of the most horrific you could imagine. A warning, it is a sad thing indeed to hear any child having to recount what they went through at school, but we are going to play a firsthand witness account right now.
It was like shots fired and then he kind of like got under the pews. It kind of, they shot through the stained glass windows, I think. And it was really scary. It was like right beside me. I was like 2 seats away from the stained glass windows. So they were like, the shots were like right next to me.
That's scary.
Yeah.
And you went under the pew after that happened?
Yeah. And
Is that
I
what everyone tried to do?
I think I got like gunpowder on my neck. Yeah.
When you heard the shots, what went through your head?
I was like, the first one, I was like, what is that? I thought it was just something. Then when I heard it again, I just ran under the pew. And then I covered my head. My friend Victor, like, saved me, though, because he laid on top of me, but he got hit.
Your friend laid on top of you?
Yeah, and he got hit.
We're joined now by Catherine Schweider, former FBI agent and prosecutor. She's written several books on gun violence and hosts the Stop the Killing podcast and how to end the mass shooting crisis. Welcome. What should we take? Yeah, what should we take in your view from another day like today? All of these shootings are terrible, but the ones at schools are targeting children, of course, especially horrific.
Yeah, I think they hit us in the gut, so hard when it's kids in schools, because we know kids are so vulnerable and it's our job as adults to take care of them. And I think that's the message right today is we are not doing a good job of taking care of our kids, let alone the adults. There are about 48,000 people who die from a firearm in the United States every year. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, 60% of those are suicide. That we could cut that, by 60% by trying to do a better job of looking for people under stress, under duress. But when it comes to these kinds of shootings, which are less common, what we have to do is look for the signs ahead of time. And I think we're just really not doing that. We're just not doing that. The signs are out there. None of these shootings are spur of the moment. They're planned events.
Is it fair to say that, without speculating too much on this individual, these law enforcement investigations are fluid, but that when people are going in to target children, they're almost always people that shouldn't have been able to get their hands on a gun in the first place?
Yeah, I don't, again, I think that's maybe a little bit further of a statement because we don't really know the circumstances. But what we do know is that, just from the stuff that's been released, the information that we've had released so far, what we know about these types of shooters is somebody whose mental health at some point really began to deteriorate, and people around that person saw the degradation of their faculties. They likely stopped communicating with other people. They began to withdraw and change their appearance. And I don't mean change their appearance like you might hear. I understand at least early reporting is that we have someone, who is female, but presents as female but was male. So I'm not talking about that kind of change appearance. I mean the clothing, the jackets and things like that. People begin to say, hey, what is going on with this person around me? We're not doing a good job of looking for that type of thing. Because I think.
But let me ask, given your reporting and your work, has this become a normal part of life in America? And if so, I mean, you've done your books and your podcast. How do you change that?
It is. It is a part of a normal life. I think that how we change it is knowledge. We're all afraid today. Everyone's afraid today, but fear can be overcome by knowledge. And there's a huge segment of, I think, our population that refuses to believe that this can happen near them and that it's only those other people who are doing it. And when you don't think that it can happen in your church or your school or your business, you're not going to be prepared. You're not going to give active shooter training. You're not going to give training on behavioral cues to look for it. If I came to you and your company at MSNBC and said, hey, I think that you should do a little suicide prevention advice for people, because no one wants somebody in their work environment to end up in that situation. People in your shop would say yes, and I'm sure you probably have. And the same thing with schools. We just have such a block on our minds about, well, if it involves guns, we want to pretend it will never happen here. And that's knowledge is what we have to get to, and we just can't seem to believe that it could happen in our own neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's frustrating.
Catherine Treat on today's terrible shooting. Thank you. We'll be right back.
The era of big government is over.
Donald Trump bringing big government back, kneecapping the Federal Reserve so that he will have more partisan control over it, trying to fire Lisa Cook, who is one of the independent board governors there. The Wall Street Journal says that firing shows Trump wants to put monetary policy under personal control. He may succeed. The country, however, will live to regret it. Trump administration also took 10% of Intel. It's now the largest stakeholder of a private company. Many financial outlets are discovering what so many experts, independents, liberals warned about Donald Trump's insatiable autocratic instincts. It's not playing well.
I don't care if it's $1 or $1 billion stake in an American country. That starts feeling like a semi-state-owned enterprise a la CCCP.
Yeah, I would just simply say that, if the government is going to get into the game of picking industrial winners and losers, every time they've done it, guess what, David? They pick the losers.
This is a really, really bad idea.
I'm sorry, but no, this is a terrible, this is socialism. You can't just be against socialism when the left does it. If you're not against socialism overall, guess what? You're going to get socialism. So if you support socialism, apparently Donald Trump is your guy.
Paul Krugman, the Nobel Prize-winning economist, recently wrote about it this week on his Paul Krugman Substack, discussing the legality and the risk. Welcome back, Professor. We actually quoted you the very night this news broke, and your comparison to other countries that have done what Trump wants to do and why it's backfired for the economy. Explain what you meant by that.
Okay, so the Federal Reserve, loosely speaking, they control the rate at which money flows into the economy. And we know that it's important to have some flexibility in doing that. You need to fight things like the financial crisis of 2008. You need to fight things like the inflation of 2022. But we also know that it's an easily abused power. It's way too easy for an autocratic head of state to say, rev up the printing presses because I want to push up my standing in the polls. And you say it's going to cause inflation. Well, I've got these guys that I like. My favorite crackpots tell me it won't be inflationary. So we have a system which is that this extremely important but dangerous power is vested in an independent agency. It's not free of political accountability. It's the board of governors is chosen by Congress and by the president and approved by Congress, but they have 14-year terms. And we've done, they aren't perfect, but they've done pretty well. And if you don't do that, the current, closest example is Turkey, where you had the president, who is an autocrat, first of all, just wanting to see the printing presses roll to make himself more popular, and then bought into crackpot economics and said, actually, raising interest rates increases inflation, so I want to cut them instead. And he didn't change course until inflation hit 80%. Do you really want to give, I wouldn't give any president control over monetary policy. There are very good reasons not to do that. And I definitely wouldn't want to see Donald Trump do that. This is, he's talking nonsense about all of this stuff. So this is, and then the way of it, just to say, it's not just that he's trying to install, cronies, loyalists at the Fed, but he's also doing this personal attack. It's basically saying, it's not just about Lisa Cook. It's a message to everybody else at the Fed. Get in my way and I will ruin your life. And this is not the America that I want to live in.
Yeah, and not America a lot of people want to live in. I alluded to how many apologists there were on the right. Even if you take the most narrow measure of decision-making, self-interest, and what companies do, fiduciary duty, what's good for this company, how is it that so many bankers who say that's what they focus on, or right-leaning, soft Republicans on Wall Street who didn't start out pure MAGA in 2015, how did they all miss this, Professor? Because it doesn't seem to be going well for a free market.
I think there's a lot of, can I say, being rich is actually not good for your mental health. Being very rich, you tend to imagine that you're invulnerable. You tend to be surrounded by people who tell you that you're always right. And it is amazing that you have, these CEOs can afford to be the best informed people on earth, and yet any random watcher of good news shows, anyone who reads a few good news sources, knew what was coming, but they didn't. And now they, by the way, they themselves are afraid. We're now
They're afraid,
already
right? And I'll let you finish, Professor, but not only was the evidence there, which is how, again, rational actors are supposed to make decisions, and Wall Street claims that's what they do, but you and I remember, and our viewers remember, in the fall, there was great attention on the autocratic issues, that even if you agreed with Trump about a basket of policy, someone who was this clearly promising an autocratic approach, who wouldn't leave peacefully last time, who vowed retribution and government abuse, would be bad. I mean, it's not like the autocratic warning wasn't offered, was it?
Right, and it was all over. It was a theme of the Harris campaign. It was, and it's not as if this is something, from the distant past that we haven't seen. You can, if you're at all aware of the world, which, CEOs are supposed to be, about Turkey, about Russia, about Hungary, that autocratic rule is both scary and bad for business, and that the fact that you are wealthy, by the way, doesn't mean that you are safe.
No.
Oligarchs thought that they had their man in Putin and that they had bought themselves control of Russia, and the ones who continue to think that have a habit of falling out of high windows. It's I'm not saying that's about to happen here, but this is definitely not what you want. And just coming back, the Fed is both that the Fed is itself something you really don't want to politicize, and also the way it's being done is a terrifying omen for everything in our society.
Understood. Then you have what I mentioned, buying up companies, which is even drawing vocal objections from some on the right. We showed that. I want to get Paul Krugman's response on that. You've agreed to stay, so we'll be back on the other side right after this. We're back with economist Paul Krugman. We covered Donald Trump's administration not only taking a big share in a private company, but saying they could do more of that. Economically, is that a sound idea? And then ideologically, is that more on the right or left end of the spectrum?
Okay, I'm glad to see that people on the right, at least some of them, are condemning it. But it isn't really socialism. It's more like well, crony capitalism is one of the ways that we describe it. The other thing is it's actually it's an extortion racket. In effect, what the Trump administration is saying is, nice corporation you got here. Shame if something was going to happen to it. How about you give us a 10% stake and we'll keep you safe. That's maybe the Chinese would call that socialism, but I don't even think Karl Marx would say that. And it is we know that aside from the injustice and the harm that's done directly, once you start to become a crony capitalist economy, or a rent-seeking is the term the economists like, where success in business doesn't depend upon actually producing good stuff. It depends on currying political favor. That does a lot to damage your economy. It means that really your economy shifts focus entirely away from economic growth towards political influence wielding.
I hadn't heard described like that socialism would be a compliment because it at least has some policy basis. And you're saying this is just extortion, which is government mafia tactics. I have about 45 seconds for any final thought.
Yeah, no, this is really, just think of Intel as being like a big laundromat where the mob insists on taking 10% of the owner's profits, right? That's basically what's going on here. It's not about industrial policy. It's not a socialism. It's just an extortion racket being run by the extorter in chief.
Wow. Paul Krugman, always the facts, very clear. Thank you, sir. We're going to fit in a break. When we come back, thank you. Why Trump has actually acted out some of the first warnings we heard in that biting South Park satire. What is America like in this first year of the second Trump term? Troops in the streets, faces of the leader on government buildings, and odd, publicly televised meetings where cabinet officials must fawningly praise the dear leader.
You're restoring confidence in government.
To recognize your leadership as a true champion for working people. Thank you for the opportunity to work for you. Mr. President, I invite you to see your big, beautiful face on a banner in front of the Department of Labor, because you are really the transformational president of the American worker.
You are the single finest candidate since this Nobel Award was ever talked about to receive that reward.
Thank you for saving college football.
You are going to save the whales on the East Coast because of this.
Hard to keep track. Did he save the whales or college football as we know it? This is not normal. That does not count as work. While in politics, there are some shout outs that go on. If you've ever been to a political event, you'll hear some extra hyperbolic praise. Most cabinet meetings throughout both parties have never spent this much time. Many people would say wasted this much time praising the leader. It's kind of become a curdled version of self-parody that was first imagined by South Park.
We thought it was only appropriate to present you with an honorary United States Marshal Service badge. And this badge comes with this little item right here, which is a handcuff key, Mr. President.
On behalf of the state of Florida, I'd like to give you this gift, a silver-plated space shuttle.
Next! Please accept this gift on behalf of Apple.
Next!
Gifts, fawning praise, and who's footing the bill? Well, when Florida pays the president, or foreign countries give him a jet, or American companies give him pieces of their stocks, a lot of it is costing you, the taxpayer. We'll be right back. Breaking news out of Washington, the head of the Centers for Disease Control fired. She was a new pick about 4 weeks into the job. 4 other CDC officials now submitting resignations, including career experts who've served under both parties, multiple administrations. Another sign of the tension under RFK's leadership. He is the health secretary and has pushed to oust all kinds of scientific experts there. The CDC is now absent a director and its chief medical officer. We will follow that story. Finally tonight, I wanted to show you some of what we're doing with our Summit series. You can always go to msnbc.com/summit and watch the longer interviews. Take a look.
Being judgmental to me just means I have standards.
Well, let's just go through it. They scream, "Brace for impact."
This is a real Dr. Jane Goodall Barbie.
A Barbie doll that encourages little girls to think that I can do that.
Reaching the summit means
trying harder every day.
Peace and fulfillment.
I feel like I'm in the foothills.
You have done something positive with the power that the summit has given you.
That I haven't got there yet, I hope.
Humility from Jane Goodall. Again, that's the link. We show you parts of these on The Beat, but just like podcasts, we actually have the longer versions online, and we've heard from many of you. You enjoy seeing and sharing them there, so take a look if you're interested. I'll see you tomorrow.